Welcome friends to another 40k video. On this day we draw from the Vorago Fastness by David Annandale. Lord Otto Dagover, an Inquisitor, organises a group of Space Marines in a Deathwatch. Their mission is the Vorago Fastness. There at the dig site has been found a Cyranax weapon, and an enemy force has arrived to take that prize. Necrons. The kill team was suitably armed to face them, and they use a teleporter to appear directly in the control room of the Fastness. As they appear, the Marines register the Necrons there. Cyranax of the Black Dragon's accursed founding chapter sees a Gauss beam glance his helmet. He fires back and causes damage, but the Necron does not fall. The dragon battered into the Necron's chest and knocked it to the ground. He plunged a bone blade into the Necron's chest, removing its head, then pulverized its skull with his fist, and his brothers in the Deathwatch finished the rest. Cyranax noticed Otto, a flesh terror, struggling to hold himself back. A nearby elevator came to their floor, and the Necrons inside met a purging fire from Xenos, whose chapter is unknown. Their legs melted, and the Marines crushed the Necron corpses beneath their boots. They then used the elevator to travel, and when the doors opened, they entered into the open air of the Vorago Fastness and fired on the Necrons they saw there using special Kraken rounds and a haywire grenade, which caught the Necrons in a disruption field that caused their movements to be jerky, and they could not fire, and between both they were finished by bolt of fire from the Marines. Cyranax sees they work well as a team. They find a rail track and trains on a crude maglev. They enter a freight wagon and the train accelerates. Over the centuries, a metropolis of improvised structures has risen. There was no order, no thought to the assemblages, just a desperate grab for whatever space and materials could be had, and beneath the ground rose and fell, and the population of the Fastness from this height eddied like a blanket of maggots. They looked desperate. Then the landscape changed to mining zones and quarries. This broke up the human squalor, and Cyranax then sees Necrons on the upper rail like statues, and they fired and cut the Deathwatcher's maglev track. Below, he could see that this would plunge them into a quarry. Cyranax hacked at a link between carts, and the rest of the train was cut away as they fell, and they missed the canyon but hit a plateau, and the kill team themselves hit the ground like meteors. After Cyranax sees the structures around them are a good place for an ambush. The Astartes took up positions on the roofs in the area, leaping from floor to floor, using their gene-enhanced strength to reach the top, and then they waited until the Necrons arrived. The Necrons moved like a single machine, and rather than trying to locate the Astartes, they killed everything in sight, moving their Gauss beams back and forth. Cyranax fired a penetrator round into the skull of the Necron leader. The leader's head exploded and the head disintegrated. Another fell to Xenos. The Necrons switched their beams to the rooftops, identifying where their targets now were, but Cyranax had moved onto the next building down. Two more fell. This continued till the fire of Xenos and him, and the rest in a pincer, all were able to start bringing down the Necrons. They took hits, but the fury of the Emperor was on them. Otto's flesh, terror, blood, transmuted to them all. After the Necrons were finished, the streets are left with dead bodies and rubble where buildings once were. The Marines pull Otto back from the rage he had seen, getting him to focus and find clarity. Soon after, the kill team find a siege on one side, 10 Necrons on the other, a monstrous face 50 meters high. It had never been human, the face. There was a vague look of scales about it. The visage had stood up the days of Necron fire. It was some sort of citadel, and the door in its mouth was where it silently roared. Then two of the kill team ran down towards the Necrons and threw their bombs. A single-eyed Necron fired with its staff and struck Kyril in the chest, and then the bomb's light swallowed the Necrons. The Cyclops, Necron in particular, they saw melt. The Relica, who had taken the staff beam, survived. With the Necrons gone, the door was opened for them. Inside was smooth, like a bubble, and the team see a Necron-like weapon before them. The nature of the link between the Necrons and the Cyranax Watchers was obscure as the Watchers themselves, but the fact of the link was clear. There was a dark logic behind the Necrons' presence here and their pursuit of this gigantic weapon. The Marines found Inquisitor Salmanau and other survivors. The voice of Inquisitor Dagover came over the speakers, and he says that Salmanau should not be difficult. Tyrus was disturbed by the Inquisitor's enthusiasm for this Xenos tech, but the Black Dragons could also be judged in such a way. And then a gauze beam broke the standoff between the two Inquisitors. Tyrus dodged it. Salmanau's retina were dead in moments, but he had the sense to duck behind the weapon as Tyrus saw the enemy that approached. The Inquisitor closed the door. The Necrons pounded it with their gauze beams to get through. The Marines gave counterfire, staggering reloads, so the shots never stopped. The Necrons barely slowed their advance. Kyle suggests he connect the gun. Tyrus thought that the idea disgusted him. Kyle says it is not done lightly, and so I should be able to keep the power connected and flowing, Kyle began. And I must pull the trigger, Tyrus finished. It was midway down the enormous barrel, shaped as if for a handheld weapon, but on a cannon the size of a major military artillery piece. Tyrus wrapped both arms around the firing mechanism. He watched the door, and it was gone, and the Necrons surged forward. His kill team faced them, and as Gerak sank for a moment under the attack, Tyrus thought him dead, but then he threw the Necrons off and burst into flames. The Marine himself, the source of the fire. His chapter was now revealed, a flame falcon of the cursed founding, declared excommunicate by the Inquisition. Tyrus had always believed being exterminated was what their fate had been, and yet here was one, no doubt existing at the pleasure of Dagover. This brought moments. Then Tyrus fired, and the weapon, as the book writes it, made the area around Tyrus feel like creation was the negation of all that stood in its path. There were explosions, and in front of the gun, nothing remained of the Necrons. Carol had survived arming the gun. Tyrus traced the gun's path of devastation, and so the recoil of the weapon's energy had travelled over the entire power network. The maglev power nodes all damaged and exploded, and the mighty tower, the centre of the grid, collapsed down. Tyrus then was in the Inquisitor's study. Tyrus says the Inquisitor is a recongregator, one of those within the Inquisition who believes that Imperial society has reached a dead end, and so they must be torn down so mankind can build anew. The Inquisitor tells Tyrus, from the mission, the wealth of the planet is preserved, and a regime unworthy of the Emperor's light has fallen. He did not plan all that happened there, but took the opportunity that arose. Dagover would control the faction that wins the civil war, and a pure order would arise. And now, friends, I turn things over to you. A comment to make. Did you enjoy the video? Let me know.